Hola, ¿cómo están? ¿Se escucha bien? ¿Están todos de acuerdo en que esto va a ser en inglés, cierto? Ya. Yo voy a partir contándoles un poquito de qué vamos a hablar. La charla, efectivamente, el título es Plantas endémicas de Chile mediterráneo, pero les vamos a hablar del proyecto de un libro que habla de esto. Es un libro un poco pesado, pesa 3,5 kilos. Este libro, en realidad, es el libro del que les vamos a hablar ahora es la segunda, es el segundo tomo de una serie de libros de ilustración botánica. Y este primer libro se lanzó en 2016 y es sobre plantas de los bosques de la zona centro-sur. Este libro, ese es un chilco, y este libro tiene 81 ilustraciones hechas por artistas de Turquía. Es un libro que se hizo en Escocia con artistas de Turquía sobre plantas de Chile. Entonces, lo que quisimos ahora nosotros como Fundación Chilco, junto con el Jardín Botánico de Edimburgo, es hacer un nuevo libro de las plantas de la zona mediterránea y con artistas chilenos. Así que es la historia que les vamos a contar ahora. Thank you, Martin. Tenía una pauta, la dejé en mi celular, así que Martin, so the first thing that I wanted you to tell our audience is about the first book. I want you to tell the story, the origins of the book.
Okay, just before I start on that, can I just say what a great pleasure it is to be here. And Martin Del Rio, you're doing a fantastic job. and I told you last year, nothing like this ever happens in the UK. It's unique, and you should all be very proud that you can achieve this here in Chile with so many wonderful people. Right, the book. So the first edition of the book, it happened because I had been traveling in Chile for a number of years. So I thought, what major contribution could I make to the documentation of the plants of Chile? You already had, or you already have, a fantastic collection of books on the plants of Chile, Adriana Hoffman books, which are very famous. And today it seems that new floras are being produced all the time. So I didn't want to impinge on that. I wanted to do something that was probably not possible in Chile because it's so expensive, and these books are expensive. So I embarked on this luxury edition of the plants, we called it the plants and the woods and forests of Chile.
Do you want to tell a little bit about Catherine Olver as well?
Yes, so I think the important thing about this project, and it's something I just want to say to people who have a great idea in their head, but they don't have the funding. So my advice to you is to do what I always do. Get on with it. Use your passion to push it, and then eventually you will find the funding. If it's a good idea, you will eventually find that funding. And that is exactly what we did with the first edition. We had no money. We found 3 amazing Turkish artists who worked for nothing for 3 years. And then I found some money from a remarkable lady called Catherine Olver, who sadly died and left me the value of her house for Chilean conservation. It was about $400,000. And I tell you why she left that is because she came to Chile on a tour with me, and she was so amazed by Chile, she felt she wanted to make some sort of contribution, so she did. So I used that money for about 10 years to bring young Chilean students to train in horticulture and botany at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Edinburgh. And then we had this financial crash because this money was invested in the city. I took the money from the investment and we put it into this book. And at last, the dear artists could get paid for what they were doing.
Thank you, Martin. And I think it is just proper that we honor Catherine Olver as well today.
Yes, no, I mean, it is remarkable. Without that money, and that money was used in so many ways until we put it into the book. And so we had Turkish artists, but the Turkish artists also came to Chile to work with Chilean botanical artists, and they had about 3 workshops here in Chile working with those artists.
And some of these artists are here today as well. The ones that trained with Jackie Pestel, Gulnur Exi, and Ishik Gunnar. So now to this book,
Okay.
there are some of the... Well, we've now included 51 species of Mediterranean Chile, but they are all endemics. They're all just... they only occur in this area or in Chile. And we think this is such an important topic. And I don't know, Martin, if you remember how we came up with this idea in the first place.
Okay, so this was a very straightforward idea. I couldn't sleep for the fact that we had not used Chilean artists for the first book. There was a good reason why we didn't. So I always wanted to try and get together with Josefina and her colleagues to see if we could do a second book, but just use Chilean artists. And the results have been stunning. As Josefina says, we've done 51, we've got 51 plates. It's taken about 3 years to do those plates. And we've got some fairly famous Chilean artists. You can't get any more famous than Andreas. And they worked tirelessly to produce these extraordinary paintings. They worked with local botanists to find some of the rarer plants. So we chose endemic plants that were mainly threatened to try and highlight the conservation of the extraordinary Mediterranean flora.
So we asked all of the artists to paint from living plants, to go and collect them in the field. Sometimes they were very difficult to find, so they had to also consult with local botanists, or Martin says. And there was another innovation that we did, which was because classical botanical illustration doesn't include other organisms. I don't know if you noticed, but the cover of our new book, it has a picaflor chico. So that is not for every illustration, but for some of them, we have added, for example, a lichen, a fungus, a liverwort, and native bees and birds. So that is, I think that is also something that makes this book a little different. Coco Bach, is she here? Coco? Coco, she's the art coordinator of the book, so let's give her an applause. And I'll keep showing you some of the illustrations. These are part of the book and part of the process. So, for example, Coco did all the puyas, all these magnificent chaguales. Coco was in charge of the 3 species that are included. One half the size of Coco, that's Puya alpestri solneri. And Martin, maybe, I know you are obsessed with Chilean endemics. You have a whole website for them. So maybe you could tell a little bit about that.
Yes. So I think what is really important about the endemic species, and just to give you a definition, so these are endemic species to Chile. They occur nowhere else in the world. And it's a very good reason why they're endemic here, because you may know, or you may not know, that you actually live in a biogeographic island. You're squeezed between the Andes and the Pacific Ocean. And when you've got that formula, you end up having unique organisms, and you certainly do in plants. So Chile has 46% of the Chilean flora only occurs in Chile and nowhere else. That is the second highest percentage of any Latin American country after Brazil. And it's an extraordinary figure. So this is 2,135 of your plants are endemic. And every year, about 10 new, very, very distinctive endemic species are discovered new to science.
Solo para enfatizar en español, de las 4.655 más o menos especies nativas de plantas de Chile, 2.135, 6 son endémicas. Ese número va variando porque cada año se describen aproximadamente 10 nuevas especies endémicas.
But the problem is, this book is focusing on Mediterranean Chile. The problem with Mediterranean Chile, that is where 53% of the Chilean population lives. And 50% of all Chilean endemics occur in Mediterranean Chile. So that is a problem. This is humankind living in an area of high levels of plant species, of biodiversity. So this is why we concentrated this book on Mediterranean Chile and the endemics to highlight the acute conservation problems that many of these species face.
So, ese es un ejemplo. Este es el lúcumo silvestre, que ahora cambió de género. Antes era Pauteria splendens, ahora es Gayela valparadisae. Y está en los Molles, que quizás muchos de ustedes han estado en esa zona, y en Santa Inés. Martin, can you tell us the story, a brief story of your favorite illustration in the book?
So I think it didn't take us long to decide. Can you go back to it? Or? It didn't take us long to decide which illustration should be on the front cover, because we chose the quintrell with the cactus and the hummingbird. Now, when you see that cactus in flower, I wonder if you know exactly what's going on, because that's not the flower of the cactus, as many of you will know. That is a parasite. So it's a parasite that lives within the feeding system of the cactus, and this occurs on 2 cactus species. And here it is in fruit, and there is a hummingbird pollinating it. And there are 2 birds, is it Thenka? Thenka.
La tenca.
Two hummingbird. There's 2 species of birds that distribute the seed. And that is an amazing story, and an amazing story of cohabitation.
And my favorite story is the one to the right, that's also done by Andrés Julián. That is Astragalus trifoliatus, la hierba del tabo, and this was not included in the original list. The same as with the first book, they didn't decide it was going to be 81 because they liked not round numbers. It was because the coile, la Ardizabala viternata, flowered in the last year of the process of the book, so they decided to include that. And for this book, this is the first 51st species. And it was because Andrés wrote to us and said, this is probably one of the most threatened species in central Chile, and nobody really knows about it. So la hierba del tabo, as you know, it grows in very, very restricted locations. It's now sort of protected in this santuario Gota de Leche. But it's still very threatened. So we wanted to tell that story, and for such a small herbaceous plant, Andres managed to develop one of my favorite paintings in the book. So that is the story, and we thought it is worth telling it. And that is why we believe in these big format books, because we make a tribute to these species, and they deserve these large format books. So, Martin, for the last... talking about the tradition of these books, and I know you have an amazing library, and some of these books by Guy and Darwin and all of these explorers. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration also for these big books.
So these books are very expensive to produce. And the reason why we want to produce a big luxury edition is because the artists like Coco put so much work into their paintings, they deserve a large format to display them. And also, I mean, Coco, your Puya, for instance, that we saw, how long did that take you to paint? 8 months. Well, you see, there you go. And you can never pay them enough, for these artists enough for what they produce. So these books tend to be quite expensive. But our format with them is to produce the luxury edition first of all, and then, as with the first edition, which we then handed over to Contrapunto, we then look at cheaper editions that are offered at a more affordable price.
And of course, the first book is also dedicated to another, to Carlos Muñoz.
Yes, it
who
is.
produced a beautiful book as well.
Yes, so there is a tradition in Chile for producing these sort of books, and that, which was called Flora Silvestre, was a magnificent book. It's probably many of you don't know it because it's a very expensive book, but that was a remarkable book that was produced in 1960 by Carlos Pizarro, who was one of the most extraordinary conservationists who actually died, sadly died, giving a lecture on conservation in New York. And the volume from that conference was called "Extinction is Forever." And we have to remember that. Extinction is forever. There's no plan B for it. Extinction is forever.
So just to close up, Martin, talking about the threats to the Mediterranean area of Chile, could you tell us a little bit how we defined in the end? Because that was a topic for discussion, a little bit about how we decided what the Mediterranean area is.
Yes, so it was very difficult to define Mediterranean Chile. There was a lot of debate about it, and there's a lot of really fantastic scientific works trying to define Mediterranean Chile, and a lot of people within Chile who have worked on that definition. And the broad definition is as far as Antofagasta all the way down to Valdivia. But we took a much narrower definition of it from Frejogue in Coquimbo down to Osorno. That was our definition of Mediterranean Chile. But it's very difficult to make these definitions, because although a lot of Mediterranean Chile is found on the coast, you do get fingers of this vegetation type going up into the Andes, across the Central Depression up into the Andes. So you just can't draw a line around Mediterranean Chile. So that's why it's quite complicated.
Bueno, se fijaron que en la pantalla atrás les fuimos mostrando los 10 artistas. Algunos, bueno, Andrés hizo 17 ilustraciones La Coco por ahí son 9, ¿cierto? Hay artistas que contribuyeron, la Fran Espinosa con este boldo, con una o dos, la Josa Arce, que es nuestra coordinadora también de arte de la Fundación, participó también como artista. Queremos hacerles un homenaje a ellos también, son maravillosos y talentosos artistas y sobre todo queremos enfatizar, nosotros somos una fundación, hacemos estos libros por amor a las plantas. Creemos que las plantas, sobre todo esta zona tan amenazadas y tan únicas, se merecen este tipo de libros. Así que los invito a conocer nuestro trabajo y a enamorarse también de este arte y esta ciencia que se unen en el libro. Y yo tengo una Loelia tupa, pero este es del libro anterior. Martín está... ese es un Blechnum, que también es del libro anterior de las artistas de Turquía. Así que les queremos agradecer mucho por su atención. Espero que hayan disfrutado de nuestra conversación. Thank you, Martin, very much. Gracias, Martin, también por fascinarse con las plantas de Chile. Su gato se llama Chile, para que ustedes sepan. Así que es nuestro mejor aliado en la conservación de nuestras plantas. Me están diciendo que les diga que compren el libro, así que se los voy a decir, apóyennos en esta iniciativa. Muchas gracias.